This is the internet court of truth and lies, and its purpose is to really give anybody the ability to test what they think is a truth in the media or a lie in the media with a group of up to 8 other people, where everybody's task is to do a fundamental dissection of a truth or a lie, but the real purpose is what's called enforced moderated dialogue. The dissection is in the form of 8 verdict questions, but those verdict questions are never the perfect questions for whatever he thinks is the truth. Their purpose is really to allow the conversation about whether or not something is the truth or a lie to stay on topic while people dialogue. And what happens, which is what Truth Court gives to social media, is people get to see how other people think, and you don't get the kind of blasting off with junk that you see in social media. You get actual meaningful conversations, and you get to see how other people think, which is almost always surprising for the plaintiff. Today's trial is on something that I believe most modern day academic philosophers don't believe. Back in the 1600s, when the natural philosophers were also the physicists, one of the greatest ones was a guy named René Descartes. He has been interpreted wrongly. I believe that Descartes was a great philosopher. One of the warnings about Descartes' works, if you ever go on Amazon or wherever and look for what he wrote, is that most of what he wrote was popular text, stuff that he wrote that was not serious. It was how you should live your life and stuff like that. There were a few books, there's really 2 books, one I call The Method, which has other names, that were his serious philosophy. And that's where he's great. Whenever you look for what Descartes wrote, realize that a lot of what he wrote was just pap to get famous at the time. His real philosophical work is self-contained and amazingly good. Descartes, sort of the guy who came up with Cartesian coordinates. So he's the one who said XYZ tells you any place in space. He was a mathematician. He predated Newton by about 50 years. He's about a generation and a half before Newton. And of course, Newton did his work based on Cartesian coordinates, really developed his laws and so forth in the time-space world of 4 dimensions. It was Descartes that first defined that way of thinking about reality. Descartes, in standard philosophy, Descartes is argued as what's called a dualist, which is he is believed to have argued that thought and reality were entirely different substances, and they worked by completely different mechanisms. And so the mechanisms of reality and the mechanisms of thought are not related to each other. This is basically what they say. It's called a dualist position. I believe that is absolutely the opposite of what Descartes argued. He argued that there is only one reality, and that is thought. There is no other reality. He argues this quite directly in the latter halves of his book, The Method. He argues that the only way you can know that something is real in your thought is if somebody else agrees they observe the same thing. Period. His definition of reality is what's called now today empiricism or science. He was the guy who created this whole idea that science depended upon replicating observations. So you don't know things until you've observed things, documented them, however you're going to document them, and then other people agree they have observed the same things. And you could reach different opinions about what you're observing, but the observations agree, and that is reality. That is the only reality a person can know, and that is the only reality that you should ever talk about because there is no other reality to know. Philosophers say that he's saying that there exists a reality that people cannot know. What Descartes said. We don't have any idea what real reality is, and we will never know it. To the extent that we can claim to have some knowledge of reality is through replication or empiricism. Descartes has other names that have been given to him. The Durant historians, who were partially philosophers, Will and Ariel Durant, who wrote a whole book called The Age of Reason, and they named Descartes as the father of the Age of Reason because of his work, because of his philosophy. It was Descartes that created the Age of Reason among mankind by this statement, I think, therefore I am.
Yeah.
But that is all there is. There is no reality beyond that. That's Descartes' actual argument. Since you can't know it, stop worrying about it. Learn about what you can know. If two people agree, then you can say that's real. If they don't agree, then you don't know. What the philosophers do get right is he very much understands that the human mind is not a logic engine, and it's an intuition engine, and it's a sensory response engine. But he believed that it worked in reality. In other words, it operated in reality, and we cannot actually know that reality except to the extent that we can know it through science. That's my argument. A video to watch was a really good video on physics. Only surface discusses Descartes. One of the things I looked up so you could see somebody making this statement about dualism. Grok basically was Descartes a dualist, and Grok wrongly gave the accepted answer in philosophy, which is yes, he was a dualist. Specifically, the most famous proponent of substance dualism, often called Cartesian dualism, which, yes, it's often called Cartesian dualism. In short, yes, Descartes is the archetypal dualist in Western philosophy. I see no dualism in him at all. He was the first cognitive scientist, actual computational cognitive scientist. He was the first one to understand that in order to understand reality, you have to understand how the brain computes. Then you can understand reality to the extent that any human can ever understand it, because that tells you what you can know and what you can't know as real. Part of the reason for that is, in his reasoning, is that people are imaginative. They can easily imagine things that are not real. Later, they learn through empiricism that what they believed before was real is not real. That's his argument. That has nothing to do with dualism. That has everything to do with the fact that the only thing you can know is what two people can agree they have observed. That's empiricism. So if somebody said that Descartes was the greatest archetypal empiricist in Western philosophy, I would be agreeing. But to call him a dualist, he literally said, do not even think about any reality that you cannot empirically verify. Don't. You're wrong to do it. You will make mistakes. It will not be reality. The reality that you search for may not even exist because you can't measure it. That's his argument. That's my argument on this thing. And I have a son-in-law who's a PhD in philosophy who has yet to object to me having this position. He's a professor of philosophy at the University of Nebraska. Opinion of me on this is basically you have your own opinion.
He sounds like a very wise man.
So I have my opinion. He has his opinion. Okay. But mine is empirically verifiable. His is not. I've told him that too, and he laughs. I'm going to go through my verdicts and then see what other people thought. And my argument is that it's a lie that the philosopher Descartes separated thought from reality. He didn't. He said thought is reality. And the only way you can know what's real is to talk to other people and see if there's agreement. Then, to the extent that there's agreement, you've identified something about reality. But there is no other reality than that. There's just none. It's just not possible. So is it the truth? I said, I think that this is a no. I think the main theme is that the reality is just a figment of thought and could only be determined as real if two people agree to observing the same reality. In this method book, he muses about all this, and he says he can't come up with any other way to figure out what reality is than empiricism. So he says, basically, stop thinking that there's a reality out there besides what you can observe. Is it the whole truth? I said, yes. It's, to me, it's a very simple and complete lie. I don't know how it caught on. I do know some of the philosophers that came immediately after Descartes who created this dualist view. But Descartes did not create it. Descartes was not a dualist, but early philosophers did ascribe it to him, and they argued about it as if Descartes had argued about it, and Descartes did not. Is it nothing but the truth? I said, yes. Again, if you read Descartes, I just don't see how people could come to the conclusion that he was a dualist. Now, he was a cognitive scientist, so he believed that to understand reality, you have to understand how the brain computes, which is exactly what is the deceit. The deceit is that the lie is misleading. It's sad that, from my point of view, that Descartes is taken to believe this thing that other people later said he was saying. Is a deceit truth intended? I doubt if anybody we can find intended this lie, but I really wish people would read the original authors on these things before they make remarks in print, particularly in major media. This is, to me, a classic case where other philosophers' interpretation of Descartes and believe that without actually reading Descartes. No comment. What is the motivation behind the truth or lie? The motivation is that I believe that people are trying to be informative, but lying, so they're not intending to lie. They don't know that they're lying, but they keep it up, which bothers me a lot. What's the social acceptability of the lie? I find this is an unacceptable lie because the philosophy community, a lot of them do read Descartes. And I watch them as they dance around this, and I go, read what he says. What label would improve the social acceptability of the truth or lie? I would like to see this is factually untrue, and a more accurate description is he's the father of empiricism. He's the father of the age of reason. Logic and empiricism, that's what you got. Okay, that's the only reality you can know. Everything else is intuitive, imaginative, and so forth and so on. Discount those things as reality unless you can empirically observe them or by logic deduce them from what you can observe. Remember, he's also a mathematician. So Descartes, in his early life, that was his real profession, was mathematics. Mathematics really is, as Maxwell said, a way of creating analogies to reality, but they're just analogies. The math is not the reality. It's an analogy based on empiricism and pure logic. That's my verdicts. What I'd like to do is get the other jurors to give their verdicts. Probably very few people agree with me, but I so strongly disagree with this idea that he was a dualist. I do not believe for a second. Now, in his popular writings, he's not just a dualist, he's like a quadruplist. He's in his popular writings, he's whether you should eat vegetables or not, which of course he has no idea. So the people will read his populist stuff and think that he must be a dualist or something, but he's not one. So anyways, juror one, I'll get a 20 or 30-second summary of your verdicts.
I can talk fast. No, I don't usually have a lot to say, but I do agree with, you've had me look into Descartes several times. I think he's one of your most favorite people to quote. But anyway, I was looking it up, and a Gemini said why he is a dualist. They said that through. They said he reached his conclusions through the famous method of doubt. He realized he could doubt the existence of his body, but he could not doubt the existence of his mind because the very act of doubting proved he was a thinking thing. I think, therefore I am. So since he couldn't conceive one without existing without the other, it said he concluded they must be distinct entities. So that doesn't make him a dualist.
So I don't believe he ever said that.
So they just lying.
He didn't know that. Yeah, they made that up. He did not say that they were distinct entities. He said all you can know of reality is what you can confirm empirically and through logic. If there is any other to reality, you cannot know it, nor can he. There is no dualism. There's no other reality other than that one reality, which is the one that comes out of your mind.
Did he propose that the mind is completely non-physical and the body is completely physical? How do they talk to each other?
No, he didn't. He didn't say that at all.
Okay, we're talking about the pineal. They said
Yeah, I know.
Said the pineal gland was the way they communicated.
No, this is.
So I'm going to tell Gemini they're wrong.
They're reflecting what other philosophers have said about him. It's a story that, like I said, it developed very quickly. Descartes didn't really publish his philosophy until he was like 50 years old, and he wrote it in his 20s. When it was published, he was already famous for all these popular things. The follow-on philosophers started objecting to him and saying, among these things, they would say that he was saying things that he was not saying. It had happened very quickly. It was not something that took 100 years for people to come to the view that he was a dualist. They were immediately misinterpreting him. He's an amazing read. I would argue that he's one of the best, but I'm a scientist, and he is the father of modern science, and he is an empiricist. He's the guy who basically said, let empiricism rule. That's the only thing you can trust. Empiricism and pure logic and real logic, which is mathematics. So there's something called symbolic logic, which is the more traditional versions of logic. So juror two.
That's me, Bob. Okay, so with this case, this trial, I was after the email yesterday and stuff, I really got to thinking about some things. And in here, I think, therefore I am is a good quote I like to use sometimes. But whenever I was listening to you here at the beginning of the trial, I was listening to, in my mind, I kept thinking about faith. What does faith have to do? So I asked Copilot to connect faith or summarize faith with I think, therefore I am. And what I got was I think, therefore I am is discovered without scripture, tradition, sensory experience, or religious authority. It's the truth you grasp from within your own mind. This is reason at its most independent. And also, it says that Descartes knows that God exists, he exists, or his thoughts exist, or whatever. But mathematics is trustworthy. Now, me and math, we just don't math. So I had to go a little bit deeper, and it says this uncertainty creates a philosophical vacuum that faith enters when Descartes tries to rebuild certainty. To escape total doubt, Descartes argues that a perfect, non-deceptive God exists. Such a God would not allow systematic deception. Therefore, clear and distinct ideas can be trusted, and that's where the faith comes in, because the connection.
So Descartes is one of the few philosophers. This very book that I'm talking about, he also proves the existence of God.
Yeah.
And he does that by saying nature is God. I can now prove its existence by the agreement among people about what they can observe.
Yeah.
That's his argument. It's as simple as that. It's a faith that you will always be able to discover new things about nature. You'll never exhaust what you can know about God in his view. It cannot be exhausted.
God that cares the world.
Yeah.
Yep.
So this is an interesting thing is in this method book, he literally outright says, I now proceed to prove the existence of God. But he cheats in some sense because he says God is the nature that you can observe directly and other people agree they can observe too. That's God to him.
Thank you.
So juror 3.
Yeah, that's me. Yeah, I'm always fighting myself, of course, to disagree. I think the philosophers dance around what he means is because he had to place the soul somewhere. And he believed the soul, and he was a dualist in the sense that the soul was an independent existence apart from the material. And he was trying to separate out the sort of cause and effect that had come from Aristotle, and sort of the mixing of matter and form and all that stuff.
Yeah,
but he did believe in the soul.
He did. Well, so what he believed was that the brain was imaginative and that there were things like soul that are imagined that you don't necessarily get people to agree on, that they can observe. Okay. And to the extent that you can agree that they can agree that they've observed the same thing as soul, that makes it real. But he says, I don't know how you would do that. Okay. And so he said, let's just leave that off to the side.
All right. I'm just going to say one more thing about his invention of the devil, the Descartes devil, confusing you. But listen, that was evil. He thought of him as being evil. Therefore, he did believe that there was a substantial reality that was born out of God's will and was absolutely, was truth. And the truth was, he used that as a contrast. So he did believe that there was a distinction.
Actually, you're making the best argument against me that can be made. Just to be clear, Andrew, you're doing the best. You could make that argument and it won't win me over. But I don't blame anybody it wins. But he does outright say that all good and all evil are in nature and can be observed. And therefore, God is evil as well as good. He says that. And he says things like soul and stuff like that that you can't agree that you can observe. What is the measure of, how do you put a number on soul? The answer is he didn't know how. And he said, for now, let's just put it aside because it ain't reality.
All right. Just, I always think of him as being actually the father of quantum theory, because in him, it's the measurement. Yeah. The measurement of the way function collapses. When he says someone else observing you, you can have another thing that's is observed, use it as the observer as well to make the reality. And that's quantum theory.
Yeah, it's quantum. Yeah, so he's quantum, but he's really in the he's in the black and white space in physics.
Yeah.
This is an area I have no opinion on it at all, what he would think. This is the sort of the stuff that came in the early 1900s and so forth and so on. And
they're just placing him on some kind of vague continuum.
Yeah, he wouldn't, I don't think he would object because there's a mathematical basis for reasoning about probabilities. I don't think he would object to that was a sufficient way to know something about reality. But whether or not reality actually fundamentally operates that way, I don't know. I don't think he was equipped at the time. Remember, he was inventing XYZ.
Yeah, no, yeah.
Ways back. So anyway, Andrew, yeah. So
all right.
You might slip me backwards on that. It's actually a good point. What you're saying is good. Juror 4.
Hey, it's me. I actually got to be a different juror this week. It's cool. When it comes to Descartes, we got to think about the context here, because people tend to approach this in an anachronistic manner, because the guy was born in 1596.
Yeah.
So the truth of the matter is that we are bound to linear time in terms of perception. 1 second follows the next, follows the next. So the truth of reality and how it's bound to mind is a bridge called perception. And I think Descartes does a great job here of explaining exactly that. Je pense puis je suis.
Yes.
But what I think is influenced by both internal and external factors. And although we can speculate on things like good, evil, the nature of the divine, the fact of the matter is that's anthropomorphizing God. That's making God human and using human boxes to understand God. And that's difficult. Because
he actually objects to that. That's what one of the things he explicitly objects to. That's the same conversation we just had about.
And so I actually really agreed with pretty much everything you had to say. I think I'm in the exact same boat. I don't think Descartes bifurcated these concepts. I think he adopted a manner of trying to explain how one is perceived through the other.
And as the limit of the knowledge that we could possibly have.
There you go. And I enjoyed the heck out of this one.
Yeah, I guess the reason that I really like Descartes is if you ever get a chance to read his method, it's just a wonderful read. It just reads beautifully. Anyway, Juror 6 or Juror 5. Sorry, you were Juror 5 last week.
See, yeah.
Good evening. I don't know what time it is there. I can hear a lot of American accents. I haven't been in a case with a lot of Americans before.
Yeah.
And it's an interesting case to me. Where I'm from, we're not all that clued up on philosophy, I would say. So I had to go and do some digging when it comes to the topic. So I try to stay on the accusation so that I don't give information that I'm not all that clued up on. But from my understanding, Descartes, when you speak about the accusation, you say that he separated thought from reality, or not you say, the article says. And that's not true. He still believed that the mind and the body interact. He didn't fully separate them. Otherwise, the mind and the body would have no connection at all. That's my understanding.
You're making the same. That is what you just said is completely true. And that is the same argument I'm making. He just said the only way you can know it is. So he is the father of modern science. I don't think anybody disagrees with that. There are people who think that some more recent people are the father of cognitive science, but I believe he is the father of cognitive science. By the way, if there was a father before him of cognitive science, the earliest one I would name is Plato. So Plato's idealism, his ideals, constructs of thought. And if you read Plato, you'll come away, this guy's figuring out how brains think. And just another argument. So Juror 6.
Greetings, everyone. I suppose the 05 was from South Africa because I can attest also we're not really much on philosophy. But as I was engaging with the topic, it was my first time even hearing about a guy called Descartes. And I will say that it has not even given me a clear answer as much as it has just forced me to question how I think itself. As I read both the article and the YouTube video, I realized that both may be wrong or at least incomplete.
Yeah.
Sorry,
So,
that
so
was like,
yeah.
I'm so
So I would recommend, if you can get a hold of Descartes' method, there are English translations. The original was in, oh, by the way, something that most of y'all probably don't know is at the time Descartes wrote his philosophy, he wrote it in French at a time when all the other, quote, natural philosophers were writing in Latin. So even Newton, 50 years later, wrote his stuff in Latin. And when asked why he wrote his technical masterwork in French, in the common language, and the commoner's language for French, his statement was, even commoners can understand my argument. Why should I separate what I say from the regular people? Latin is dead. The regular people can't read Latin, which is an interesting statement. He was a very interesting guy.
yeah, and I feel like it also kind of made me wonder whether the real issue is Descartes at all, or is it how we as modern people use thinking to justify our decisions and then just call those justifications reality. And I feel like Descartes' statement that says, I think, therefore I am, it is like unchangeable because it's like self-proving. Because the moment you, I feel like I am, when I start doubting, it's like I am thinking and therefore I do exist. Yet, like, I feel like this idea, if it is misused, it can become dangerous because it like shifts from proving existence to creating reality. And I find myself questioning this in my own life. And I think if I think I'm nothing, then I begin to live as though that thought defines my reality. Even though my ability to think, feel, fear, and anticipate already proves that I am something, right? But this confusion has made me question not only what is real or what is false, but whether I'm even thinking correctly. So I think I enjoyed it. It was like a brain teaser for me. But yeah, I think I should read.
By the way, just to point out, this is not an objection to you, but it's not Descartes, it's Descartes.
Oh, okay.
There's no E,
Descartes.
the ES is French. The ES is not pronounced. Brian
So it's
Clapp.
Sure, 7, Bob.
Oh, 07, sorry.
Hi, everyone. I do agree with you, Bob, by saying that Descartes didn't separate thought from reality. And I do agree. I like how Brian explained about how we move through linear, since we are three-dimensional creatures. And if we had to separate the two, we'd actually be four-dimensional creatures living between the different realities, since we can switch between them if we could. So I do agree with you saying that he didn't separate it in the sense of, if we think about it like the previous juror said, I can think the way I want to love, that wouldn't be able for us since we are three-dimensional creatures, since we live in the 3D platform. But if we could, it would be possible. But I do agree with you saying that he wasn't a dualist. I do agree with that. I think it was just staple what he was saying. Yeah, and I have nothing else to say.
Hi everyone. So I'm also a South African, so I literally had to go dig in about this topic. And obviously I need to go dig in more about this subject.
Yeah, go ahead.
But from my side, the rejection is obviously not saying Descartes is a liar, but it's about pointing out that his theory fails to match the integrated reality of being a human. And I'm sure there is people that believe we found a particle truth, something that we have an internal life, but used it to build a logic wall that doesn't actually exist in nature. And the mind and the body are different in the nature. Thank you. That's all I got.
Oh, so you are a dualist, I think. So I believe Descartes was not one. He thought that the only reality was thought. And it was only a subset of thought. It was the thought that could be empirically confirmed by another person. In other words, you see something, they see the same thing. That's reality. If you see something and nobody else sees it, you did not see reality, period. You might have, but you can't know you saw it because you don't have somebody else agreeing. And so he's the father of modern science. This is replication in science. He's father of the age of reason. You can't just imagine something. It's got to be based on a common understanding and logic, which is what his argument is. I appreciate all this. Are there other comments? It looks like we'll end a little early this time.
We can go back and forth about Descartes for the next couple hours.
Yeah, we could spend hours on Descartes.
Are there any additional comments? Yes, but
yes.
Let's call it before we get too deep in that.
Do y'all know how Descartes died?
No, what you got?
So I was on the phone with Rand, who's Greek, and he knew that, and Swedish, and he knew the Queen of Sweden that had invited Descartes to her cottage for a winter. So by the time Descartes was over 50, he was quite famous for his public fluff work. And he would reside with kings and queens. And so he accepted with the Queen of Sweden to spend the winter in Sweden. And she gave him a little house that was not heated.
In the Swedish winter, not heated.
In the Swedish.
Good call. Good.
And so he died of what we now believe is a cold. He didn't freeze hard to death, but he died from just getting sick. And he died in that little cottage in Sweden, and the Queen of Sweden regretted it because she didn't have enough time with him.
Interesting. The Library of Congress gives us, I ran this through Gemini, and the Library of Congress is the source. And apparently the Queen was a serious student of philosophy.
Yes,
and
she was.
And she had called him to be there, and she wanted to get lessons at 5 a.m. Yeah. And, well.
Yeah.
Actually, quite a lot of people got done by the cold. Francis Bacon.
Oh, yeah.
Earlier.
Yeah, it was a deadly disease. Yeah, people were very sad. Descartes was famous in Europe, through Europe.
Yeah.
And you can read his other stuff. The problem with it is it's just pap. And he knew it was pap. But he was getting famous. He was getting famous for it because he was giving this advice. People loved to get his advice. He would make things up all the time. We see that today. But his serious philosophy was quite serious and quite good. So I keep saying over and over again, don't read the pap, because the pap is pap. There are 2 books. Typically, if you go on Amazon, you'll get both books together. One's I call Method because part of the title is Method. That book is in translation in virtually any language, and it's on Audible. You can listen to the real Descartes, his philosophy, just in those 2 books, and just ignore all the rest of the junk. It's just junk. So this sounds good. So we'll see y'all next week.
All right. Have a good one.